Welcome back to another episode of Faith and Inquiry. I'm Daniel, and this is my buddy Arend. We're going to discuss topics of faith, religion, and questions that naturally arise from those issues. I wanted to say thanks for the new subscribers. It's really nice to see a new channel take on a few subscriptions right away. That's really cool, very exciting. Arend, do you want to add anything before we dive into the topic?
Okay, awesome. I think we can go.
All right, let's do it. So I was wondering whether or not we should do the role of God in war, or what is love and how it relates to religion and belief, and maybe specifically Christianity. And then Arend, before we started recording, brought up something that I think is really interesting. What did you say about love and war?
Yeah, let's talk about love and war
together. And you were saying that you think they can't be separated?
All is fair in love and war. It's not a scripture, but you know.
It's an adage that a lot of people know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's definitely a scriptural basis for this. What I mean by that, something that was revealed to many people about God, and that is He is just. And, you know, he likens himself to a shepherd. And if you, for instance, look at, you know, the sheep that are being, you know, dragged out of the camp by a wolf, are you going to, you know, just sit back and let the wolf drag all the sheep and kill them? Or are you going to, you know, take action and, you know, save the sheep? So, though nobody likes war, there are some, I should say, cases where it is required, where there's no other way. It basically comes down to the question that if somebody would invade your house with a knife or a gun and threaten to kill your family, would you merely sit back, or would you defend them? And what would be the means of, you know, defense, other than, unfortunately, having to kind of copy the bad guy? So, you know, that's a very, very interesting, I think a very strange perspective that I have on those things, that, you know, war would not have existed if evil did not exist. But because of weapons existing, how do you defend yourself against something, you know, that you have to have a counter for that? There are, for instance, references that deals with the spiritual side of things, that says that our weapons of war are not carnal, but mighty in God for the pulling down of strongholds, for you know, taking down every argument, everything that raises itself against Christ. So that signifies that there's a place for prayer before actual war is needed. So I'd say, like, you know, if you can pray and things can change before there's escalation, it's better. That is encouraged as a higher, you know, weapon.
I get really, I don't even know what the word is. My perspective on war and how people deal with that in relationship to their faith. So, for example, we didn't do a show last week because I went to go visit my family in Pennsylvania. And anybody who grows up in Pennsylvania inevitably learns about the Battle of Gettysburg. Are you familiar with the Battle of Gettysburg?
I've heard about it, but I don't know the full historical context of
I could give you a real quick summary. And, you know, for anybody who doesn't know, it was the single bloodiest battle in American history. And it was in the American Civil War. So in 1863, the United States was divided, the North versus the South, the Union versus the Confederacy. The Confederacy invaded the North. They were trying to eventually make their way to Washington, D.C., hoping to end the war. And by a lot of mistakes and chance, they ended up having a massive 3-day battle in a tiny town in the middle of Pennsylvania. And it's a beautiful place. What's amazing, it's been preserved for all these years. It looks like for the most part, as it did in 1863. But you hear the stories of the soldiers and their justifications for doing what they had to do or what they thought they had to do. And of course, at that time, the United States, both the North and the South, where people were extremely religious. And you hear the prayers are written down in letters to their family, letters that were just their own diaries. You see what the generals were thinking and how they were hoping God would favor them. And then you see the generals and the leadership giving God credit for things. And then later, some of those things fall apart. People say God willed this and God willed that. And you hear that from both sides. And, it's one perspective to look at this from a deeper historical perspective, where you have different cultures, different languages, different religions, people fighting each other that are extremely different from each other in their culture, their religion, whatever. Of course, they're praying to their gods. But here is an example of a civil war where they're basically praying to the same God. And I think of the example of the sheep that you gave, where the sheep, instead of battling the wolves, they're battling each other. And they're not sheep anymore. They're some sort of vicious, bloodthirsty, non-sheep creature that both of them think that their shepherd is on their side. And they're just, 1863 battle technology was pretty horrendous. It's gotten worse in a lot of ways. But at that point, there was nothing noble about it. It was just butchery.
Yeah.
And what the thing I kept thinking about, what is motivating these people to do this to their own brothers, right? Their countrymen, their brothers, and sometimes literally their brothers, their own family, brother against brother. I really struggle to see what role God actually played or could have played in this. And again, I don't even have a good definition for what God could be in my mind. I always draw a blank. I run out of logical thinking when we start to get there. But there's got to be some perspective that I'm missing when it just seems like this is a completely intractable thing that has nothing to do with faith. Yet, so the men on both sides were attributing their acts and their motivations to faith. How do we square this? What's the role of God in this type of situation?
I'm thinking of Job. I don't know if you know the story of Job. I'd encourage you to, if there's two books that you read, it is Proverbs and Job. Extremely rich, and I think Job is also the oldest book in the Bible. And it has a lot of wisdom, I think, when it comes to this specific situation that you're explaining, because in the end, his friends visit him. And this is my interpretation of it. So I'm not saying this is the official one. I might not be completely there, so there might be a fuller, maybe, revelation behind that. So basically, they come to him and they say that, this and this and this. Are you sure you've committed some kind of sin? There's something that you did, and now you're in this situation. That's why you're being punished by God, etc., etc., etc. And then Job would go ahead and defend himself and say, if there's any man that's like righteous, it's me. And he just goes on a whole rant of like how righteous he is. And then later on, God responds, and basically he says they're all wrong, which is quite interesting. And my perspective was, his friends are wrong because they're accusing him. And that attitude, even if he is guilty, is wrong to just accuse somebody, because he is ultimately the judge. He makes the final decision. So taking that position and accusing somebody, even though you might be right about what you're accusing them, is a wrong attitude. And then on Job's side as well, where he also says he's righteous and perfect and all these things, it's not true, because he's a man and, people make mistakes. So I believe it was his perspective on Job thinking that, okay, he is perfect, where God can see his flaws, but he doesn't see his own. And what then happened later on, he asks Job, these questions about creation. Do you know how this was made? Do you know how that was made? Do you know how the earth was placed in its position? And all these things. And he just says, well, basically, no, I don't. And then after that, things just change without explanation, really. He's restored. And so that was like a very powerful kind of like encounter with, being humbled and kind of dealing with pride, because I think there was a lot of pride involved on both sides, with his friends and with him. He also mentioned that the worst thing that I have feared has happened to me. So he was dealing with fear as well. He was dreadful. He was like, God, just kill me. But despite all of that, it's also wrong to say that it was because of his sin, because it was never about that. It was merely because Satan said, look, this guy, look at what he's doing. So he comes into the court of heaven. He says, now he accuses Job, look at, he's going to turn his back against you as soon as you take all his wealth away. And then for God to be a just judge, he does not ignore him, but he proves Satan wrong. So that's the thing when somebody comes with a, accusation. God has to prove it wrong. He doesn't just say whatever, it doesn't count, because he displays that, he is truth. So because he came with the accusation, it had to be sorted out. That's, I guess, a little bit beside the point, but just, for some context. So I think, a lot of times people think that they know and say the right things in the name of God. There's also the very famous, one of the 10 Commandments, do not use the Lord's name in vain. What does that imply? Don't just speak his name for no reason at all. And secondly, don't use his name as saying God said this when he did not say that. There's a reason for that, so people do that because they can't defend themselves. And I think people get to a place where they can't defend their actions anymore, and then they reach out to kind of the answer that they're supposed to reach out to, but instead of listening to what needs to be done, they just take action, in the name of God, and then things happen.
There's so much I want to pick apart on what you're saying there, and there were a lot of things that you hit on that I'd love to go back and review. Do me a favor though, and look, can you bring this back to what we were talking about with the
Civil
the
War.
North versus this? Yeah.
So basically,
because I don't want to get down too many other. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, because I could easily. Yeah.
So what I'm basically saying is, do I believe that God was on the one side or on the other side? I'd say on neither and on both. And why I say this is because, let's say there are two people that are fighting each other. The one is fighting because of these reasons. The other one is fighting because of other reasons. It could be that both of them are even right, saying that these guys are doing these things that are wrong, and the other guys are accusing them, saying they are doing these other things wrong, and both are right in their claims. But the way that they want to now resolve things are wrong and evil. And even in a evil situation, God can turn things around. It says where he can use everything for his good, so he can turn evil into good. That doesn't mean the evil becomes good, it is just the outcome. So let's say something bad happens and people humble themselves and they actually seek God again, good can come. It does not say that he desired the evil to happen, but it happened. So that's that's my stance on war. Am I a fan of war? Definitely not. So because there's also the perspective of where Paul says, it says, be at peace with all men as far as is possible. So it implies also there's a place where you can no longer, where there's just a disagreement, and it's a disagreement, and it's either going to, it could end up in a war, or it could end up in like a way of reasoning things out. That I would say, I would say I believe that God is more a fan of people reasoning things out than fighting.
Okay. I'm trying to, in my mind, distill down what you just said into something that we can use as a jumping off point to keep going here. And tell me if I'm wrong. It seems like things here on this planet can simply get to a point where we simply can't resolve our differences in a reasonable way. And we've all been there, right? Hopefully we're not there trying to resolve the differences with violence, but unfortunately it just gets there way too often. And we end up having to simply, again, I'm trying to tie this into what you said about Job here as well, that when we look at things from maybe the God's point of view, looking down at all of this, I mean, it's so simple for some sort of divine consciousness to say, well, you don't even know how any of this stuff got here. What do you think you're gonna make sense of this? Which is what I'm taking away. Am I wrong to interpret things that way?
Well, it's basically just, God saying that you're not all knowing, and you will probably never be. I guess maybe when we die, I think there's a possibility to step into that all-knowingness, but having all of that on Earth, it's almost like being cursed with knowledge.
I could see that.
Where you look at things and you're like, what's the use? It's when you read Ecclesiastes, it gets to that level of like, what's the point? So, what's the point of working, but yet there is something in work, that is special, but it's all just meaningless in the end.
Unfortunately, I get what you're pointing to here, and it really makes this intractable paradox that we're cursed no matter what. If you have knowledge, that in itself can slow you way down. It's hard to find meaning in things when you can see if they're meaningless. But then also the ignorance, being without knowledge, is also a curse.
Also not good.
It's also not good. So it's again, I think this ties a little bit back to what we were talking about maybe the last time. It's like, well, who's responsible for this mess? We are in a situation where we can just, I mean, July 4th, it was America's birthday a couple days ago, and I found myself having a political argument. And I don't like having political. I used to do that when I was a young man, and I got a kick out of it. And then after enough time, I was like, I don't even know if I'm right. What am I arguing for? I can't figure anything out. I know I'm an intelligent person, but the only thing that has led to is me knowing that I don't know anything. And I can talk myself into and talk myself out of positions. And there are ideas that I've held years ago that I look back on and I think, wow, was I dumb? Or I was arrogant, or anything you want, right? But then we are continuously put in these positions we have to keep moving forward. We have to keep moving forward. We have to make decisions. We have to work together. But then we get to these moments, and it's like this in the United States. I know you guys in South Africa having your own issues. We're getting to these breaking points with things. We have incomplete knowledge, but then we have people, and please don't take offense to this. It doesn't matter if it's religious faith or just the conviction of your own beliefs that are secular. We go into situations that are disagreements, and we are damn convicted of what we think. And then we can use justifications like religion. Well, this is what God thinks. God is on my side. And that just is fuel for the flames, right? And then you end up in these, tragic, catastrophic situations of war, brutality, cruelty, and people find justifications for it. And sure, I can see the thing that you're saying about Job, that, yeah, if you look from the outside perspective, we don't know what the hell's going on. We really don't. But we still need to find justifications for our actions. And religion, unfortunately, can be a justification for our actions, and it's a justification that has very little evidence. It's faith. You know, there's no scientific argument you're going to make here to say, well, God's on my side. And if you believe that, you're gonna, I mean, again, what we talked about in episode 1 with the pyramids, I'm still stuck on ancient Egypt, just looking at that stuff, studying it. And the motivation that people must have had to put the pyramids together, organize, be committed to that project for decades, do it again and again and again, right? I mean, they truly must have believed that their pharaoh was a god, or at least they acted in that way, whether it was from fear or some other motivation. What do we do? What do we do? It's both good and bad. Sorry to do that one.
No. I mean, if you should complete, what you want to say, so I can.
I did it this way, a little obnoxious.
Okay.
Sorry, buddy.
So, all right. So, I think when you look at the Crusades, let me just read a summary. So the Crusades were a series of religious wars between the 11th and 13th centuries. I'm sure you know about this, just for everybody else. Initiated by the Latin Church and European powers to reclaim Jerusalem and the Holy Land from Muslim control. The First Crusade began in 1096 after Pope Urban II called Christians to take up arms, leading to the capture of Jerusalem in 1099. Several more crusades followed, marked by violence, shifting alliances, and failed campaigns. While framed as holy missions, the Crusades were also driven by political, economic, and territorial ambitions. They had a lasting impact on Christian-Muslim relations, European expansion, and the power of the Church. Now, I'd say there is like a place, even when you read in, let me just find that it is Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1,8 deals with the uncomfortable kind of reality that to everything there's a season, a time and a purpose under heaven, a time to love, a time to hate, a time of war, and a time of peace. So it implies that there are different things that could happen. It does not necessarily imply that despite these things having time, that it's all good. Because Jesus says, like for instance to his disciples, you will have tribulation. So he's implying like bad stuff is going to happen, but don't worry because I overcame it. So if you trust in me, you will get through it. It wouldn't faze you. So I believe there's a higher way of dealing with things. Like if people want to talk about higher self, the higher self is being Christ, being in him and doing what he did. There's no better example than a higher self. So let's say look at those wars and ask yourself what would have happened if they reached out to the Muslims in love and whatever, brought them food and did what Jesus actually said, forgive your enemy, love your enemy, give them food if they ask for food, give them clothing if they want for clothing. What would the impact have been if all those that were involved in that war went and did another warfare, which would be a warfare of love instead of hate and destruction? What would the outcome have been? There is also the reality where people would, like, let's say you want to reach out and they simply say no, we don't want it, right? So let's for instance, let's look at maybe people that are busy with very evil activities, whatever it could be, human trafficking, whatever kind of things that are really like serious and it's affecting millions of, let's say, children or whatever. What do you do if you want to reach out in love and they say no? That's a place where like a certain form of justice needs to come much faster. So now when you look at Paul, who used to be Saul, who persecuted Christians, he killed them. Okay, so he wasn't just just hunting them down and giving them a beating. That he was killing Christians actively, and he thought he was doing the right things in the eyes of God, until he ran into Jesus Christ. It literally knocked him off of his donkey or mule or whatever he was riding on, or horse, and he had this encounter where he was physically blinded. So it was like an infliction. Yet the voice asked him, why do you persecute me? Not my people. Why do you persecute me? Why are you fighting me? So he was blinded, but then he was told to go to a certain man to get healing. So, there's kind of like, okay, so there was punishment, but then he was restored as well, and then he began actually preaching. So there's this place of, good people that can actually change. There's the potential for that. And just merely going to war can rob people from that reality. When you look at, for instance, the terrorists that actually met Jesus and so on, that was the result of definitely prayer. Somebody was praying, and then that terrorist had that encounter, and Jesus forgave him for horrible things that he did. So when you bring the cross into this reality, not in a religious way of justifying your evils, but in a way of justifying the evil of both sides, I think it's much different. If both sides can look at the cross and ask themselves, like, but am I really right? I'm not trying to justify myself by showing the cross, but I'm just asking, am I right? So like a way of asking yourself, am I right? The other party would ask themselves, are they right? That's a very humble act that not everybody can do.
Sure. So, it needs to be done like almost on every decision if you're really going to try to live a good life.
Yes, exactly. And so that's what's the difference between love and lust. Lust is taking, love is giving. So lust is this thing, look at the cross, I am justified, I say God is on my side, so I imply immediately that God is not on your side, which cannot be done, because God is on the side of people, because he sent Jesus Christ to die for everybody. It says he did not come to judge us, but to die for every single one on earth. So that immediately, when a person says that, they kind of put themselves outside of that reality, which is difficult to grasp. Like how much sin is evil enough to not be forgiven? And
okay, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Please
so
finish.
Forgiveness is the better way, but who has the humility to do that?
Not enough of us. Not enough of us. And again, just going back to conversations that we've had in private, it's a hard thing to get yourself to forgive every single day, and you have to keep reminding yourself. And I find myself in positions all the time where I can feel that forgiveness slipping away, like I'm redacting the forgiveness, right? And the poisonous feelings start to outweigh the peace of forgiveness, right? And there is a part of us that wants that poison, that somehow gives us a feeling of power,
a justice and justification that you see,
righteous indignation. And thankfully I'm in a place where I'm not letting that overtake me, and I'm like, oh, whoa, let's put that, let's turn that knob way down, right? But I don't know, I don't know if enough of us are capable of doing that. And in fact, when that righteous indignation is starting to crank up, it is like a feedback loop. And then again, you're talking about finding justifications and taking action. When you are motivated by righteous indignation, you will simply act, and then you'll find the justifications later, and they'll just fit whatever your belief system is. You can make anything fit, and the more linguistically gifted among us can whip up a nation into feeling righteous indignation, and then you get yourself World War II. What can we do? I mean, and again, going back to Job and the other things we were starting with, it seems like at a certain point you simply have to just shrug your shoulders and say, well, this is how people are, and it's all something that we don't understand, which puts us in the situation of, well, if we don't want this to happen, to me, I'm coming to the conclusion that we just simply need to be passive. And who wants to do that if you want to live a life, right? You have to take action. This is like the story of Arjuna, where Krishna would always would put the bow and arrow into his hands, even though he was in a situation where he had to fight his own family. And Krishna, well, I think it's Krishna. Any of you people who know the story of Arjuna better than me, please jump into the comments and correct me. But I take this as, look, you're going to just find yourselves in the most ridiculous situations here on this planet. You won't understand it. You won't want to do anything, but go ahead and pick up that bow and arrow anyway. You got to do something, you know. And then I think what you're going to say, and again, correct me, Jesus will forgive you afterwards. This is such a, what a mess we have on our hands.
I think this is exactly the ultimate like reason for why Jesus came, was because we are a mess. And there's the righteous indignation, there's the justice part of it, everything. You know, it was like God went to war against sin, but he took sin on himself. So it was like, you know, bearing the pain that we caused him on himself. Which, like, if you can imagine like your son being in pain, that's terrible, right? Now imagine you're a person that you can become you know, a human being and be the son of God as well, and allow yourself to see your son in pain, you know, as a justification. It's like a part of you for the rest of the world, also willingly, because his son chose to. I mean, I don't think there's any more powerful way of, you know, reconciliation than that. And all that would require is for you to come to that altar that was created, you know, 2025 years ago. So it's literally, you know, a reset. When you think about it, it's a reset on the calendar. It's a reset on, you know, everything. The Roman Empire, everything changed drastically. You know, the whole world changed. The thing of actually having morals and values became a thing, because before that it wasn't there. The Romans would, you know, just have orgies in the street and stuff like that. That would be normal. There wasn't morality or moral values. I mean, if you go read up, they worshipped, like, you know, sensual stuff and selfish stuff and just feasting all of the time. So it definitely brought that. But now, okay, people are still going to, you know, fight about stuff. So if you have two people that disagree on a thing and they both want to, for some reason, defend themselves, or they have some sort of insecurity, they're going to fight. But if you have two people that disagree, that don't have that kind of place of, I need to defend myself, they're going to be able to talk it through and debate it and still be, you know, at peace with each other. So it's, and unfortunately, those, you know, you get these people that they cause other people to, you know, riot with them. They influence them. They call them to arms. So, and I think honestly, you know, if God would look at that when the time comes for those leaders that influence people to go to war, they would carry a heavy burden. They would carry a heavy judgment, obviously. And if they don't bend the knee, then it's going to have some devastating, you know, consequences. When you look at, like, well, I wouldn't say like I'm a fan of war. I wouldn't say that. I don't even think that God likes it. But I think he knew that it was inevitable. It was going to happen. I mean, he even said that you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, earthquakes in various places. That's a prophecy. So that's what Jesus said. He said, like, this is going to happen, but don't let it trouble you. This does not say that we should not stand against it and just let it happen. It says it's going to happen, but we should obviously, you know, to our best of our ability, try to live at peace with all people as far as possible. So like when you look at the Ukraine-Russia situation, I mean, that's really unnecessary and it sucks. And both sides are hurting, both sides, men are dying, people are dying, churches are being destroyed. A lot of stuff that I think could have been avoided. I don't think there's a justification for war. However, I do say is, when it does happen, what do you do to defend yourself? So other people have decided on your behalf war is happening. Now you're a citizen in this country that is at war. Unfortunately, you're going to have to do something, right? You're going to have to protect your family. So I'd say, like violence is a very like the last resort of like self-defense, I think when it comes to this, if it's literally about self-defense and this is the only way, then so be it. So if there's a nation that has a leader that threatens to press a red button and destroy a whole other nation, what are you going to do? So,
There's a lot I want to say about what you're bringing up. I think the first thing that comes to my mind, or maybe the most pressing thing, is I think I know your answer, but the question that comes to my mind is, how can we look at these circumstances as anything but God's mistake? That if it's prophecy in the Bible, and I'm sure it's in religions and cultures and stories and mythology from history, deep time, right? This is inevitable. This is the inevitable outcome of the forces that are at work in your world. Conflict, right? Deprivation, violence. I mean, it's baked into nature that there's a gradient of resources, and there's going to be conflict and violence to acquire those, and you have to get them if you want to survive. And that survival instinct is at the base of your psychology, and it goes deeper than psychology. It's with creatures that don't even have psychology, have their survival instinct, right? So this is how it is here. Is this a mistake? Was that, like, how could it be that everything God does is good, but when you boil it down to it, it really looks like this is just inevitable on this planet, no matter how you slice it? How do we reconcile this?
Genesis 6 verse 6-7, and the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping things and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. Don't you see like a lot of emotion in that as well? Like a lot of like, almost like very human kind of...
I've never heard this passage.
And that is what, like God was grieved. And this is what so he sent the flood. Then he saved, the family of Noah, because he saw that the thoughts, that man, the stuff that they had in their heart was continually evil. And he didn't like it. So the first time that happened, and then he said he's not going to do it again. So he made the rainbow as a covenant, as a promise that he's not going to do that again, because obviously I think he saw that it wouldn't be necessary. Well, there was a point where like things got so corrupt that if he didn't reach out to save Lot's family, he would have been like messed up himself. There was like an angel sent to save him and his family. It was so sick that the men were outside the door, banging on the door, saying, we want to rape these angels that are visiting you. And that Lot, so debased that he said, rather take my daughters. I mean, that just shows you like he's already on shaky grounds here. And God wanted to destroy all of that, because here's the thing, that stuff multiplies and it just keeps on going and going and going and going. So, and it was literally about preserving the bloodline so that Jesus Christ could be born through all of that. So the devil was constantly trying to corrupt the seed, with everything that he had. And ultimately he failed. And he became so confused that he wanted to kill Jesus, but he also wanted to stop Jesus from being killed because he wasn't sure what was going on, but there was something up. Why this? Surely, Lord, it shall not be. So Peter told Jesus, "No, like you're not going to get crucified." And Jesus told him, "Get behind me, Satan." But then on the other side, Satan entered Judas, and then he betrayed Jesus so that Jesus could be crucified. So it was like he was not sure what God was up to. He was trying to do things from two sides. And ultimately, Jesus was killed, and he thought he won until he came back. So he went to hell, paid the price, and took the keys of Hades and came back. There's the justification if you just believe in it. That's all. So millions of people have stepped into that area where they do believe in it, and it has caused a lot of change to come. The world is still a mess. I get it. But I mean, there's a way to get out. There's a way that's been provided now. So as Jesus said, it is finished. Meaning that the justification is done. You can just receive it. It's like all the work has been done for you. You can receive the finished work, right? Like the finished package, the finished thing. If you just repent and believe, that's all. It's not like you have to do this and that and go in a circle and then draw some kind of symbol and then sacrifice a chicken and none of that. Just believe. That's the only prerequisite to receive.
I got to push back a little bit, and I think this might be a bit of the low trust Los Angeles culture that's worn off onto me a little bit, or maybe more than a little bit. But I tell you, around here, you make one mistake and people don't trust you ever again. I don't know what
Canceled.
It's like. Canceled. You're canceled. And by the way, a lot of those mistakes are pretty arbitrary and frustrating. Like, you don't even know that you made a mistake. Of course, it goes for obvious, mess ups too. It really sounds to me like God made a mistake and did not like the outcome of his creation and said, whoa, okay, we're not doing this again. And then he's going to offer a solution. And I'm thinking, well, why do I want to take that solution if it might get screwed up again? Like, how do I know that this is the right solution? I thought you put it together the right way the first time. What's with these rainbows now in your promises? Like, I didn't even ask to come here. And I'm here, and there's problems, and you're saying you see the problems, you're going to change the problems. I don't even understand this. You tell me one time, were you here when the so-and-so was made? Do you know how this is made? And okay, no, I don't. So I have to deal with the consequences of my own ignorance, and it seems like things are a mess. But just do this one thing, bro, and you're going to be saved, right? Like, what am I missing here?
I think God gave mankind a fair chance. You can compare it to, like, for instance, this whole conversation where I listen to what you have to say, you listen to what I have to say. So God gave mankind like enough time, to make a decision to follow him or to turn from the evil ways. And it came to the point where it was evident that was not the case, and now it's time to plan B, which was the second Adam. Because the first Adam messed up, the second Adam had to come. Now the first Adam was given dominion over the earth, over the creatures, over everything. And what did he do? He listened to a snake. He let his wife listen to a snake, and he kind of submitted to his wife and did whatever she was deceived into doing, which was a lie also, because they were already like God, but the devil convinced him that they're not, and then he stole. So he stole the world. So he became he ran away with the title, basically. But as soon as that happened, there was a promise made that her seed, so there will come somebody out of her lineage that will crush the head of the serpent, but the serpent will bite his heel. And that's Jesus. So he would crush the head of the serpent, but he himself will also die. That was the moment, that Adam and Eve messed up. And throughout all those many years, I think, people were given a fair shot, so God can say, I am just. I'm not unjust. I gave you a chance. You did not come to the table. Now it's time for, the answer that will, fix it, that will fix things. This does not mean that the devil is not going to stop, trying to resist that, because what did he do? He's, pushing against everything with the Antichrist spirit, saying things like there is no God, saying things like there's all this other stuff, or worship me, or anything but Jesus, because that's the agenda that he's pushing. It could be pushed on someone else, and that could be imprinted on another person as well, indirectly. So it's not always direct, but that's the agenda. So what does he want to do? He just wants to keep you away from Christ. Why is he pushing so hard? Because there's the answer to your problems. And that's the fight. So the spiritual battle that we are in is just literally the devil trying to, like a dog, like a wolf, steal the sheep and run away. And it's up to, Christians to deal with that issue and to pray so that people can get saved, and people are getting saved. People are marching through the streets, with Jesus banners and everything. So there are stuff happening, but some people choose to not see that. I was blinded to this whole reality of church for 25 years. It was a paradigm shift. When I really found the power of God, it didn't exist to me. That's literally how much I was blinded and how far I was kept away from that. So if you imagine you're in a prison on an island, isolated, and there's other stuff happening on the other side, that you never get to. That's how it is. And that's the ultimate goal, to put you in a prison, to blind you, to lie to you, to confuse you, to do all these things just to keep you away from that, making that decision. And then, so if you've never, had him, there's this constant fight, like, no, it's not real, or this or that, all these excuses. And eventually, so I had to fight through that myself. I just said, like, whatever, I'm just going to ignore this voice, because the voice was saying, these people are going to judge you, they're going to hate you, they're going to, all these things, it's not real, you don't deserve this. It's just on and on and on and on and on. But I just pushed through, and then they didn't judge me, which was crazy. I had a t-shirt on that said WTF with two pandas on top of each other. And I was wearing that inside church. They didn't say a thing. I was standing in front of the entrance smoking because I wanted to get them to react. They didn't care. They were like, oh, you're here, hi. I was so, I went out of my way to get a reaction. I didn't get it. And that broke me. I was like, wow, there is actually unselfish love. Now, that's not always, unfortunately, the experience that everybody has at all churches. I know that's real, and that sucks. It's unfair. But that doesn't say now the truth doesn't exist. If there's only a few people that really know the truth on this earth, I'd rather be with that small group than be with the masses who are lost and full of, confusion and following lies.
Sure. I think
even if it's unpopular.
That's why I wanted to do this with you. Is I think we're just trying to get at what's true. We're just trying to get at what's true. I hope I'm trying to do that. Hopefully I'm not lying to myself. I wanted to throw one thing in here. So I don't know if you have these in South Africa, but in the United States, we have these giant indoor play centers. At least in LA, we've got these things. And it's like, there's one around here called Sky Zone. And it is like a massive indoor trampoline park. All right. It is such a great time to bring the kids, and you can just let them run around, and do whatever. And it's great. Right. But when you go to this place, you have to sign a waiver, understandably, right? You got to say, okay, you can't do these things. There's these risks, and you take responsibility for whatever happens in here. Fine. Maybe that's just American culture at work, but I would never let my children go into there and sign the waiver. That's my responsibility, right? And if, Sky Zone is actually not Sky Zone, but really it is a life and death battle, and it's completely inscrutable. The stakes are as high as they could be. It's confusing. We have animalistic impulses and intellectual counters to those animals. This whatever we've got actually here. I'm trying to make an analogy, saying, well, it seems like life on this planet is like Sky Zone, where now you're saying that, oh, actually you did sign this contract, you better not screw up. Oh, by the way, you don't even know what's happening here. There's violence. Who? I would never let my children into this place if I didn't know what they were signing up for, and I wouldn't let them sign these contracts. I read the contract. It's my responsibility, right? I would put them into Sky Zone. I wouldn't put them into, violence and war zone, and give them the pen and say, okay, sign your rights away. You know what I'm saying? What do you think? Like, to me, we're here. We're in war zone. We're not in Sky Zone, right?
Yeah.
Why? And who signed my contract for me?
Yeah. So it's when I hear of things like, for instance, people in China that encounter Jesus visiting them without any evangelist being present, which has happened to many. When I hear that happen to people like in like Islam that were part of terrorist cells, that really gives me hope. That shows me that also, again, there is justice. There is a way to escape. However, I wouldn't say life is fair to everyone. I would say everybody has a certain shape of unfairness in their life. And if I would just blame the unfairness in my life for the rest of my life and never move beyond it, what's the point? So some people were raped, some were molested, some were abused, some went through this and that and this and that. I had my fair share of that. So if I sit now and say, okay, well, this is unfair, woe is me, I got out of it, right? And so Jesus healed me, and if he can heal me from that, and I've helped people deal with rape, I've helped people deal with those type of painful things and abuse and all those things, and their life is better now. So if they could get out of this and you see that results, like, why not just take try that medication? So what I'm saying is life can be very unfair, but at the end of the day, when you find healing to the extent where you are so healed like it never happened, I'd say it's fair. I'd say, like, I'm a new person, so it's gone, so all the pain of yesterday is no more. If you look at the world like this massive, like, let's say this was a game, this was this massive map that you're exploring with all these wild animals and beasts and demons and stuff all around, and here and there was like these pillars with like a proverb written on it, as a guidance, as like a guideline, like, avoid this path, try this one rather. And then people could just ignore it and, well, whatever, I'm just going to ignore it, and they go on the path and they end up being destroyed, and then they just get more angry, and then they get another one that says turn around, and then they refuse and they keep going, and that's up to them, right? So that's like, I don't think God did not leave us with, like, he didn't leave us with nothing. There are churches, there are pastors, there are people that are responsible, and if you look for them, you are going to find them, and their duty is to protect people. Now, sure, I get it. Sometimes that's not the case because people make mistakes, and I know that can make you hurt and so on. But ultimately, what I found is, if I just keep seeking God, no matter how crazy things get or how unfair the pastor becomes or whatever, I was okay through all of that. Even in places where I had to avoid certain pastors and so on, for reasons I don't even know, and it wasn't even revealed to me. I was just listening to God, just following his footsteps, and even though it sucked, I just kept going. I didn't understand why. He clearly knew that perhaps the motives was not really, for him in those specific areas that I was, or maybe it's just bigger than that. Maybe he just had a different plan for me. So if you really seek him, you're going to find him, but it requires, like I said, a seeking of him. It requires a level of communication that you need to kind of start, engaging with. If there's some kind of happening, and it's like it's revealing a certain part of him, start seeking that out, and you will find answers. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight. It took me a few months. No, it took me maybe a year or longer. Before that, even more. So it's not always just overnight, but the promise is, as you continue, things will become clearer, and things will, be revealed as you are also made to, receive things. Each person is different. So some people, it can take 20 years, and then all of a sudden they're like, wow, I understand it now. They understand, at least they understand what they need to understand. They found the revelation that they needed, that you might not understand yourself. Some just get it overnight. Others 40 years, who knows. Some get it on their deathbed. I'd say if I compare a person that lived his whole life as a Christian and only finding that on his deathbed at 90, it's fine. You're with him, As long as that happens, I'd say, that's a good thing. So, and what makes it difficult is there is a level of responsibility given to man to propagate this and to teach people the truth, and to make sure there's signposts out there, and to make sure that people can see stuff, to make sure that there are movies, to make sure there's like worship music, to make sure there's like whatever avenue available for people to get saved. And people are doing that. I mean, they're even having churches on like some of these metaverse stuff where people in wheelchairs that can't attend church can now go to church virtually. And some of them are even like avatar characters. They don't want to reveal their identity. But when I see stuff like that, I see like God finds you as you are, and he's okay with you just as you are, There are ways.
One thing I do love... I'm sorry. Please finish.
Sure. Now you can talk.
One thing I do really find interesting about the version of Christianity that you bring to the table is the come as you are and be accepted as you are. And it's not just you. I've heard that in other from other Christians as well. And it's not every Christian or people who say they're Christian that they don't always bring this attitude. But I tell you what, man, it is, you're talking about having things revealed and things becoming clearer the more you seek. I have to say that my experience is the opposite, that the more I seek and the more I try to take in information and ask questions, and it seems to me the darker things become. Not darker like some sort of spiritual darkness, more like vagueness or uncertainty about my ideas, uncertainty about what people are actually meaning when they say the things that they say. And of course, the problem that I think I started this conversation with on our first episode was, man, I mean, there are so many people that are so convinced that they have the answer, but everybody has a different answer. So what type of clarity can we get from this? What kind of clarity can we get from this? It's very difficult for me to take any clarity from this. It just seems like a big twisted up bowl of spaghetti, and I'm trying to find the end to pull it out and straighten, untangle it. Help me out.
I think I used to try and understand everything, which was interesting. And I was always like, my curiosity was always poked by everything, and I would just keep on trying to understand everything for years. And I came to the point where I just made peace with, I'm not going to understand everything. And so I had a personal encounter where God said, you will not understand everything. And that is where trust comes in. And so I said, okay, well, I'm just going to start trusting you. And from there, it was the strangest thing that happened. That was easy for me to just give myself grace when I messed up. It was easy for me to just go easy on myself and be more patient with myself. And like I say, I mean, everybody makes mistakes, and then you can be angry with yourself for a little while, but ultimately God wants you to get to that point where you're happy with yourself and you have peace. You're not in war anymore. I used to be in a warfare with myself, and it was like that, just more and more and more and more and more and more questions. That's what happened to me, until some stuff, pain came out, and rejection and stuff from the past that was the reason for, I'd say, me being stuck in not finding like answers, because I was angry, and that was my case. So specifically angry at God. And when that broke, everything changed. And it was rejection. It was extreme criticism, abuse, those kind of things. A lot of people go through these things and don't talk about it. And when somebody talks about it, you think like, oh wow, so glad you survived. But the reality, so many people are having the same stuff and they just think, no, mine is not as bad as yours, where it's maybe sometimes, it's really bad. You might look down on, like, let's say what happened to you. But if you can find that place where those things that happened, that you just feel like, God, this is your fault, or there is no God because this happened. If you can find, like, healing in those places, just those small places can make a massive difference. For me, it was rejection. So all the chaos in my life just started by feeling rejected for a very long time, and not really having a father, so despite him being there and despite them still, being married to this day, he was not present because he himself was stuck in stuff that happened to him, abuse that he went through as a child. And so, he's still kind of hiding. So, it's like some stuff is just it's not fair. But if you then say, okay, but it's also not fair to die on the cross for people, there's justification, because he understands. He's like, I did it for you. I was rejected. I was hurt. I was, all these things. I went through that for you. I think one of the most powerful encounters I had was I was a little boy, and I remember walking into my dad's office, and something bothered him. I don't know what was going on. He was frustrated with something that had nothing to do with me. And I was, it was a silly little thing. I was like walking outside and I was seeing like butterflies emerging from cocoons, or something like that, against the wall. I was so fascinated by this, and I thought, he's going to love it. Like the scientific mind that he has, he always had this, explanation for like every biological thing and so on. And so I went to him, and he was just like, go away, like that kind of response. And I was like devastated, and that killed something in me, when I was like very small. And I walked away just feeling like nothing, but that was the pain inside of him. It wasn't me that frustrated him, but I took it as rejection. Years later, so I guess I was 25 or 27, I prayed, and then Jesus took me into that memory that I forgot about. And he said, we're going to, visit this place. So he walked with me into that room, and I saw my dad, and I saw that, and he just told me, he's just busy right now. Let's go. And so I turned around and walked away, because I saw he was like just illogical and angry and nothing to do with me. And I just walked out with him, and I showed him, the butterflies and all these things. And I remember he showed me, like, he was carrying the cross, and he said, like, you're not alone. I was also rejected. And so in that place, it was like we became friends. on that level of like, he understood my rejection, I understood rejection as well, and I was healed. So from there, and every lonely childhood memory that I had, he showed me I was with you, every single one. It all came up. He said I was with you. I saw every single detail. So that was how I found, how I found healing, where I realized, oh, I felt rejected, but they rejected him. And so in my state of rejection, I was actually with him. And I was like, but he created everything. So what do I have to lose? Like, if you can be with the most powerful, person that ever existed and ever will exist, why does everything else actually matter? If he if he can change, anything at any given moment, and he has the power to do that. So that was, where things, really changed for what was difficult for me. And out of that came atheism. Out of that came hatred and alcohol and a lot of stuff that I tried to grasp to. I was just looking for peace and answers. And I only found everybody else's pain. And so I was naturally filled with, pain, because I was hanging out with people that are just like, really, their life has been like really terrible. 90% of the friends I had like really went through horrible stuff. And honestly, to this day, it hasn't changed. The people that associate with me are usually people that went through a very tough time in life. And I've made peace with it now, where I'm like, well, that's what I went through. So, perhaps I can help them, perhaps I can, in my way, help them to overcome the similar type of wounds that might be different. But it's to me, it's worth more than just, having friends for me to lean on.
Yeah, you transmuted your suffering into something that is nourishing for people. You transmuted your the poison into something that sustains people. And so
in that, there's also justification, because I have the testimony, I went through it. So it's like, if you tell me I'm struggling to quit smoking, I can tell you I did it for 7 years. I was a chain smoker. If you said, okay, but I love drugs too much and all that, I could tell you I've done all of that. So it's, I guess, in various areas I really understand. And so that's like that's something that God created in me that he can use to help others. And so there are many others who have different stories. It's just about you finding the right person, the right mentor, and just keep on asking questions.
Yeah,
even if it lasts for many years, you might be surprised how you having so many questions are actually helping others, right this very moment.
Yeah,
and therein is also purpose and meaning.
One thing I'm good at is asking questions, I think. Despite any other things that I've tried and failed at, or tried and succeeded at, I've always been good at coming up with questions. So hopefully I am asking questions that are making people think and getting us to some sort of useful information that I hope can help people, and I hope it can bring some understanding about what the heck we're actually even doing. But yeah, we've been at this a bit over an hour. I hate to wrap it up at such a poignant story, but maybe what we should do is pick it up with that story and what that translates to in lived experience, and how that can hopefully help people next time. I think that would be a good episode 6. Is this episode 5? I think this is episode 5. So yeah,
awesome.
Anything you want to add to the end there?
No, that's all for now.
Yeah, all right, I really appreciate it. It was great as always, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Take it easy.